Usually when we talk about personal transformation, we are like completely primed for this big cinematic moment.
Oh, totally. The lightning bolt.
Right. We are culturally conditioned to look for that overnight success, the sudden epiphany, or, that dramatic montage where the protagonist gets angry, the heavy rock music kicks in, and everything about their life radically changes in exactly 3.5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, we love a good montage.
We really do.
Yeah.
But when you look closely at how human behavior actually works, you realize we've been staring at the completely wrong thing this whole time.
We absolutely have. I mean, we're obsessed with the final destination, the big reveal. But we are completely blind to the microscopic, almost invisible machinery that is quietly and relentlessly moving us toward that destination.
Yeah.
We want the result without, understanding the mechanism.
Welcome to the Book Nook. I am so excited for this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a book that has fundamentally shifted how people understand that invisible machinery. We are looking at Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones, by James Clear.
Such a massive, massive book. Multi-million copy bestseller for a very good reason.
Exactly. And the mission for this deep dive isn't just to hand you, the listener, a superficial list of productivity hacks. We want to really explore the underlying behavioral psychology, the neurological feedback loops running your life, and the profound, honestly, almost unsettling truth that tiny atomic level changes dictate exactly who you are going to become.
And setting the philosophical tone for this exploration,
Yeah.
it requires a massive shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Like, we live in a world that sells massive overnight transformations. Buy this pill, take this course, change your life tomorrow. But this material asks you to do the exact opposite. It demands that you zoom in on the atomic level. It requires you to look at the tiny, mundane, seemingly insignificant choices you make every single day and recognize them as the fundamental building blocks of your entire reality.
But to really understand the DNA of this methodology, we can't just, jump straight into the behavioral science or the brain chemistry. We really have to start with the crucible where this entire philosophy was forged. We need to look at James Clear's intensely personal origin story.
Yeah, we have to.
Because this isn't just some clever prologue to sell books. This incident was the literal testing ground for every single concept we're going to discuss today.
It's a harrowing starting point, honestly, and it strips away any illusion that the system was built in some pristine academic laboratory. It was built out of sheer, terrifying necessity.
Yeah, let's get into it. So it's a sophomore year of high school. It's the final day of the year, and he's playing baseball. A classmate takes a full swing with the bat, but the bat slips out of his hands.
Just a freak accident.
Completely. It flies through the air and strikes squarely in the face, directly between the eyes, and the physics of the impact are just devastating. He doesn't even remember the hit. The blunt force crushed his nose into this distorted U shape.
Yeah.
It shattered the orbital bones of both of his eye sockets. And worst of all, the soft tissue of his brain slammed into the inside of his skull, which caused immediate massive brain swelling.
And the medical crisis that unfolds from this single accident is just catastrophic. Because when you're dealing with traumatic brain injuries, TBIs of this magnitude, time is the single most critical factor.
Right, because of the pressure.
Exactly. The skull is a closed box. When the brain swells, it has nowhere to go. The pressure builds, cutting off blood flow and damaging brain tissue. But initially, the severity isn't entirely obvious to the people around him.
Yeah, he actually manages to walk to the nurse's office.
Which is wild. But it's only when he gets there that the neurological deficits become terrifyingly apparent.
So the nurse starts asking him standard orientation questions to assess his cognitive function. She asks what year it is. He says 1998. It was actually 2002.
Wow.
She asks who the president is. He says Bill Clinton. It was George W. Bush. And then there is this chilling detail from the text. She asks for his mother's name.
Yeah, this part is hard to read.
He stalls. 10 full seconds go by before he can retrieve the name Patty. 10 seconds just to remember his own mother's name.
And that inability to retrieve basic information, that is a hallmark of severe intracranial pressure. That was the last thing he remembered before losing consciousness. His body simply couldn't handle the rapid swelling anymore.
So what happens next?
At the local hospital, his autonomic nervous system begins to shut down. He loses the ability to swallow. He loses the ability to breathe on his own. He starts having violent seizures.
It escalated so quickly.
It did. The local doctors quickly realized they're completely unequipped for this level of trauma. So they order a life flight helicopter to a major specialized hospital in Cincinnati.
And here's a heartbreaking layer of context that makes this story so heavy. His parents are rushing to meet this helicopter at the hospital in Cincinnati. And it is the exact same hospital, the exact same facility they had practically lived in a decade earlier when James's little sister was diagnosed with leukemia at just 3 years old.
Just unimaginable for the parents.
I can't even fathom it. She had recovered after 2.5 grueling years of chemotherapy and spinal taps, but now his parents are walking back into the exact same trauma unit with a different child, facing a totally different nightmare.
Yeah.
And by the time he lands, he's had his third seizure, and the medical team has to put him into a medically induced coma and place him on a ventilator just to stabilize the brain activity.
It is absolute rock bottom, and the recovery roadblocks waiting for him when he finally emerges from that coma are immense. I mean, we take our basic sensory processing for granted, but his entire system was shattered.
What were the immediate effects when he woke up?
Well, when they finally bring him out of the coma, they discover he's lost his sense of smell. To test it, the nurses have him blow his nose and sniff an apple juice box. But the act of blowing his nose forced air through the massive, unhealed fractures in his eye socket.
Oh, no!
Yeah, which literally pushed his left eyeball out of its socket.
Oh, my gosh. That is horrifying.
It's just visceral. It's bulging out of his face, held in place only by the eyelid and the optic nerve.
I mean, how do you even process that as a teenager?
Wow.
The ophthalmologist tells them the eye will eventually slide back into place as the air seeps out, but it takes weeks, and he suffers from severe double vision. It takes him 8 months of grueling physical therapy just to regain the motor control necessary to walk in a straight line, let alone drive a car.
Right. 8 months just to walk.
But here's where I want to pause, because this is where the narrative usually shifts in our cultural mythology. We expect the triumphant cinematic montage right here.
Here comes the training sequence.
Exactly. We expect him to get angry, hit the gym, and suddenly he's the star of the high school baseball team. But that is not what happens. He returns to baseball a year later, and he gets unceremoniously cut from the varsity team as a junior.
Brutal.
He's sent down to play with the sophomores. He writes about sitting in his car, crying, flipping through the radio, trying to find a song to make him feel better.
Because real life rarely operates on a cinematic timeline. The Hollywood narrative does us a massive disservice by compressing years of invisible struggle into a 3-minute highlight reel.
It really does.
Clear's turnaround wasn't born out of a sudden burst of heroic motivation. It was a slow, gritty, painfully unglamorous accumulation of incredibly mundane choices. And that brings us to his time at Denison University. College became the laboratory for what would eventually evolve into the concept of atomic habits.
Right, because while his peers were doing typical college things, staying up late, playing video games in messy dorms, eating terrible food, Clear had this profound realization he couldn't control the massive outcomes of his life.
He was still dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah, he couldn't magically rewire his brain to make himself a starting pitcher. He couldn't undo the trauma. But he could control his immediate, highly localized, small environment.
And that locus of control is crucial. When you suffer a massive trauma, you feel entirely powerless. The world has acted upon you. By building small, almost invisible routines, he began to claw back his agency.
What kind of routines are we talking about here?
Very simple things. He made sure he went to bed early every single night, ensuring his brain had the required state to continue healing. He kept his room obsessively neat. He started lifting weights consistently.
Which doesn't sound like much.
No, at first glance, making your bed seems entirely disconnected from the grand ambition of becoming an elite baseball player. But neurologically, these actions were doing something vital. They were rebuilding a foundation of self-trust. They proved to his brain that he was capable of keeping promises to himself.
And the results of those microscopic atomic habits compounding over 4 years of college are staggering. He grows from a 170-pound fragile featherweight into a 200-pound highly conditioned athlete. He earns straight A's. He becomes the team captain.
Just builds and builds.
And by his senior year, he is named the top male athlete at Denison University and an ESPN Academic All-American, which is an honor given to only 33 players in the entire country.
If we extract the core lesson here for you, the listener, it's vital to note what Clear doesn't say. He didn't go on to play professional baseball in the major leagues. He isn't claiming that making his bed turned him into a superhuman anomaly.
Right, he didn't win the World Series.
Exactly. His triumph was fulfilling his absolute potential within the constraints of his reality. The underlying message is that reclaiming control over your life doesn't happen through massive leaps of faith or Herculean, exhausting efforts. It happens through the relentless mastery of your immediate, small environment.
Okay, so that origin story gives us the why, the crucible. Let's transition into the how, starting with the core philosophy of the book and the actual math of improvement.
Let's do it.
Clear introduces this concept of getting just 1% better every day. He states that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And to make this abstract mathematical concept concrete, he uses this brilliant analogy that really stuck with me.
The airplane analogy.
Yes. Imagine you are sitting in an airplane on the tarmac at LAX in Los Angeles, and your destination is New York City. If the pilot shifts the heading of the plane just 3.5 degrees south before takeoff, which translates to a movement of just a few feet at the nose of the aircraft, you don't land in New York.
Where do you land?
You land in Washington, D.C., hundreds of miles away from your target.
The physics and navigation embedded in that analogy perfectly illustrate the role of time and distance in compounding. Because at the moment of takeoff, a 3.5-degree shift is physically imperceptible. The nose of the plane moves maybe 80 inches.
Right, you'd never notice.
If you are a passenger sitting in the cabin, you don't feel a lurch. You don't feel off course. You're flying over the exact same initial landscapes, but magnified across the vast expanse of the United States. That microscopic trajectory shift completely alters your final destination.
It's crazy when you think about it like that.
And this is exactly how a 1% improvement or a 1% decline functions in your daily life over the span of years.
But let me push back on this, or at least point out why this is so maddeningly difficult for us to internalize. In the moment, a 1% shift feels like absolutely nothing.
It really does.
Our brains aren't wired to care about 1%. If you eat a greasy burger and fries today, you don't look in the mirror tonight and see a sudden 10-pound weight gain. If you sit down and study a new language for 20 minutes tonight, you don't wake up tomorrow fluent.
Right.
If you save $10 today, you aren't instantly a millionaire. This single decision is so incredibly easy to dismiss because there is no immediate consequence.
You are touching on a fundamental limitation of human perception. We struggle because the results of our actions are lagging. This is a critical concept from the sources. Our outcomes are simply lagging measures of our habits.
Lagging measures. Unpack that a bit.
In economics, a lagging indicator tells you what has already happened. It confirms a long-term trend. Your life works the exact same way. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your physical weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits.
That makes so much sense.
The clutter in your living room is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. Even your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. You get what you repeat.
You get what you repeat. That is such a stark reality to face. If my house is a mess, it's not because I had a busy week. It's the lagging measure of weeks of tiny decisions to put things down instead of putting them away.
Exactly.
But this disconnect between the action and the lagging result explains why so many of us struggle, right? We get trapped on what Clear calls the plateau of latent potential.
Ah, the plateau of latent potential. This is where most personal development goes to die.
It really is.
It is a massive psychological trap. Why do people quit the gym after 3 weeks? Why do people abandon a new diet after a month? Because the human brain inherently expects linear progress.
We want A to equal B right away.
We have a deeply ingrained transactional mindset. We think if we put in X amount of effort, we should see Y amount of result immediately. But the universe doesn't operate linearly when it comes to growth. The most powerful outcomes of any compounding process are heavily delayed.
The sources use a couple of fantastic ways to visualize this concept. Think about an ice cube sitting on a table in a room that is exactly 25 degrees. You want to melt the ice, so you start heating the room. 26 degrees, 27 degrees, 28 degrees.
And nothing happens.
The ice cube just sits there. 29, 30, 31, still nothing. You are putting in the work, you are actively expending energy to raise the temperature, but there is zero visible results. Then you hit 32 degrees and the ice begins to melt.
And that final 1-degree shift didn't do all the work. It was the invisible accumulation of all the previous temperature increases.
Exactly. Or think of a bamboo tree. You water a bamboo seed, and for 5 years, nothing breaks the soil. It looks like you are watering dirt.
I'd be so frustrated.
Right. But underground, it is building an extensive, massive root system. Then in year 5, it shoots up 90 feet in the air in just 6 weeks.
And that is the crux of it. The work you are doing when you don't see results isn't being wasted. It's simply being stored. You are building the root system. You are heating the room from 25 to 31 degrees.
That reframes everything.
And when you finally cross that critical threshold, when the results finally manifest, the outside world will look at you and call you an overnight success. They only see the 32-degree mark. They are completely blind to the silent accumulation of work that went into getting from 25 to 31. This is why you cannot rely on immediate visual feedback to sustain your habits.
So, if relying on immediate visual feedback is a trap, how does this reshape our traditional approach to self-improvement? Because usually we start with the goal. I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to run a marathon, I want to write a book. We worship goals.
We really do.
But the material brings up a highly provocative, counterintuitive idea. It states, point blank, goals restrict your happiness. And the argument is that focusing intensely on the destination is actually detrimental to your progress. I mean, my whole life I've been told to set SMART goals. Why are goals suddenly the villain?
Goals aren't necessarily the villain, but a goal-obsessed mentality is inherently flawed. The text unpacks three major systemic problems with goals. First, there's the either conflict.
Okay, what's that?
When you set a massive goal, you implicitly create a binary state of existence for yourself. You tell yourself, I am only successful if I hit the goal. Until then, or if I fail, I am a disappointment.
Oh, wow. I do that all the time.
You literally defer your happiness until the next milestone. You spend 99% of your time in a state of self-imposed failure, waiting for that 1% moment of achievement.
That is exactly how I felt when I was trying to learn guitar. My goal was to play a specific, complex song perfectly.
Yeah.
And every single time I practiced, I felt like a failure because I wasn't there yet. The practice itself became miserable because the gap between where I was and the goal was so huge.
Exactly. You boxed yourself into a narrow version of happiness. The second problem is the yo-yo effect.
The yo-yo effect.
Yeah, goals are frequently at odds with long-term sustained progress. Think about runners who train intensely for 6 months for a specific marathon.
Yeah,
They stick to their diet, they run in the rain, they're perfectly disciplined.
right.
What happens the day after the marathon? They stop running, they eat junk food. Why? Because the goal is gone.
Yeah.
The external motivator has been removed.
So true.
If all your hard work is entirely dependent on a specific goal, what is left to push you forward after you achieve it? Achieving a goal only changes your life for the moment. It doesn't permanently change the underlying systems that caused the problem in the first place.
This is where I find the analogy of a vehicle and a destination to be so helpful. If goals are the destination on the map, systems are the vehicle you actually use to get there. The goal gives you a direction to point the car, which is useful, but the system is the engine, the steering wheel, the daily act of driving.
To the process.
If you spend your entire road trip staring intently at the map of your destination instead of watching the road in front of you, you're going to crash the car. Which leads us to arguably the most famous quote from the entire text, the one that really encapsulates his entire philosophy.
Let's hear it.
You do not rise to the level of your goals. You
Right.
fall to the level of your systems.
It is a profound realization. The purpose of setting goals is to win the game once. The purpose of building systems is to continue playing the game indefinitely. True, long-term thinking is actually goalless thinking.
Goalless thinking. I love that.
It's not about any single accomplishment. It is about the cycle of endless refinement and continuous improvement. But to build a system that genuinely lasts, you have to understand the architecture of change. You have to understand the 3 concentric circles or levels of behavior change.
Okay, let's visualize this. Picture a target with 3 rings. The outermost ring represents your outcome, what you get. Losing weight, publishing a book, winning a championship.
The goals.
Exactly. This is the realm of goals. This is where 90% of people start their journey. Moving inward, the middle wing represents the process, what you do. This is your habits and your systems. Going to the gym 4 days a week, writing for 1 hour every morning.
And the center.
The innermost circle, the very core of the target, represents your identity, what you believe. This is your worldview, your self-image, your deep-seated judgments about yourself and others.
The fundamental mistake most people make is trying to change their habits by focusing on what they want to achieve. They try to build outcome-based habits. They say, I want to be skinny, so I will go to the gym. But the alternative, and the only reliable path to permanent change, is to build identity-based habits. You start by focusing on who you wish to become, not what you want to achieve, because true behavior change is, at its core, identity change. You might start a habit because of motivation, but the only reason you'll stick with one is that it becomes part of your identity.
Okay, the difference between outcome-based and identity-based change sounds great in theory, but let's ground this. How does this actually play out in real, everyday conversation?
Let's look at the psychology of smoking cessation, which the book uses as a great example. Say two people are trying to quit smoking. You offer a cigarette to the first person, and they decline by saying, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit."
Sounds reasonable.
On the surface, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable, positive response. But listen to the underlying belief. They still fundamentally believe they are a smoker who is merely attempting to be something else. They are hoping their behavior will change while carrying the exact same beliefs.
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
Now, you offer a cigarette to the second person, and they simply say, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker."
Wow. It's a microscopic difference in phrasing, but the psychological gap is massive.
It is.
The second person is signaling a complete shift in identity. The former behavior of smoking no longer belongs to their current self-image. It would cause cognitive dissonance for them to accept the cigarette. The ultimate goal isn't to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal isn't to run a marathon. It's to become a runner.
Precisely. Behavior that is incongruent with the self will not last. You can want more money, but if your identity is someone who consumes rather than creates, you'll always be pulled toward spending. You can want better health, but if your identity is someone who prioritizes comfort over exertion, you'll always choose the couch over the gym.
The text mentions this incredible anecdote about a friend of the author who lost 100 pounds. And she didn't do it by adopting some brutal crash diet or setting an arbitrary goal weight.
No, she used a system.
She did it by constantly asking herself one single question. What would a healthy person do? She used this question as her North Star all day long. When deciding between walking or taking a cab, she asked, what would a healthy person do? When looking at a menu, she asked, would a healthy person order a burrito or a salad?
It's so simple.
Her logic was that if she just acted like a healthy person long enough, eventually she would just become that person. And she was absolutely right. It proves that every single action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. You don't need a unanimous election to change your identity. You just need a majority of the votes. You literally become your habits.
And this is where we have to transition from the philosophy of identity to the hard mechanics of the brain.
Yeah.
If you truly become your habits, and if we want to fundamentally change those habits to cast better votes, we have to look under the hood at the neurological machinery driving them.
Let's look under the hood.
Because human behavior isn't magic. It is a mechanical feedback loop. Try, fail, learn, try differently. Over time, as we navigate our environment, the useless movements fade away and the useful actions get reinforced by the brain. That neurological reinforcement process is a habit forming.
Let's actually dig into that machinery.
Yeah.
Because I think we throw the word habit around a lot without understanding what the brain is actually trying to accomplish. Jason Reha, a behavioral scientist referenced in the material, defines it beautifully. He says, habits are simply reliable solutions to recurring problems in our environment.
I love that definition.
Right. Your brain is an energy-intensive organ. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but uses 20% of your energy. So it is constantly looking for ways to conserve energy. Habits exist to automate solutions to the recurring problems of life, freeing up your conscious, analytical mind to tackle new, complex challenges. And this neurological automation always, without fail, follows a four-step loop.
Understanding this four-step habit loop is non-negotiable if you want to redesign your behavior. It's the operating system of your life. Step one is the cue. The cue is the trigger that tells your brain to initiate a behavior.
Like an alarm going off.
Exactly. It's a piece of information that predicts reward. From an evolutionary standpoint, our prehistoric ancestors were constantly scanning the environment for cues that signaled primary rewards: food, water, sex, shelter. Today, our brains are still scanning, but we are mostly looking for cues that signal secondary rewards: money, fame, power, status, or social approval. Your brain detects a cue and it immediately classifies it as an opportunity.
Which instantly triggers step two, the craving. This is the motivational force behind the habit. Without some level of motivation or desire, without craving a change in your internal state, you have no reason to act. And this is a massive point of clarification. You do not crave the habit itself. You crave the change in state it delivers. You do not crave the physical act of inhaling smoke from a cigarette. You crave the feeling of stress relief and the dopamine hit it provides. You don't actually crave turning on the television. You crave the feeling of being entertained and distracted from your anxiety. Desire initiates the behavior.
And that craving is fundamentally driven by dopamine prediction error in the brain. When you anticipate a reward, your dopamine spikes, It is that anticipation, that craving, that propels you into step 3, the response.
The actual action.
Yes, the response is the actual habit you perform, which could take the form of a physical action or a mental thought. Now, whether a response actually occurs depends on two things: how motivated you are, which is the strength of the craving, and how much friction is associated with the behavior.
Friction is key here.
Absolutely. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you're willing to expend in that moment, you won't do it. Your brain calculates the energy cost versus the anticipated reward.
And if you execute the response, you finally arrive at step 4, the reward. The response delivers a reward. And rewards serve two vital neurological purposes. They satisfy us and they teach us. First, they satisfy your craving in the moment, providing a temporary relief from the desire.
Ah, that feels better.
Exactly. But more importantly, they teach your brain which actions are worth remembering for the future. The brain monitors the outcome. Was the reward worth the energy? If yes, it strengthens the neural pathway connecting the cue to the response. Cue, craving, response, reward.
And if a behavior is insufficient in any of these 4 stages, it will not become a permanent habit. If you eliminate the cue, your habit never starts. If you reduce the craving, you won't experience enough drive to act. If you make the behavior too difficult, you won't be able to do it. And if the reward fails to satisfy your desire, your brain won't bother remembering it.
It's so mechanical when you break it down.
Exactly. The first 2 steps, cue and craving, are the problem phase. You notice something is missing, and you desire to change it. The second 2 steps, response and reward, are the solution phase. You take action and achieve the desired change. This entire loop happens in milliseconds continuously all day long.
So if our brains are just these complex dopamine-seeking missiles logged onto this 4-step loop, how do we hijack the radar? This brings us to the operational core of the book. James Clear takes this neurological 4-step loop and translates it into a highly practical, actionable framework called the 4 laws of behavior change. This is the mechanical system for building good habits.
Let's break down the mechanics. The first law of behavior change directly addresses the cue, and the law is: make it obvious. One of the biggest obstacles we face when trying to change our behavior is that our good intentions are entirely too vague.
Oh, I'm so guilty of this.
We all are. We say things like, I want to work out more, or I want to eat healthier this week. But we leave the actual execution up to chance. We wait for motivation to strike. Clear suggests a heavily researched strategy called implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions.
You have to remove the ambiguity by explicitly stating your intention. The formula is rigid. I will do this behavior at this time in this location.
It sounds deceptively simple, almost childish, but the psychological studies behind this are wild. It forces your brain to create a concrete plan, essentially preloading the decision into your subconscious. Instead of I'll try to exercise, it becomes I will exercise for 30 minutes at 5:00 p.m. at the local gym. Once the time and location are set, the cue is obvious.
It takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. But my favorite strategy for the first law is something called habit stacking.
Habit stacking is brilliant because it leverages the neurological pathways you've already built. According to Hebb's law in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together.
Okay, science check.
Yeah, but it's simple in practice. You already have dozens of rock-solid habits. Brushing your teeth, pouring coffee, walking the dog. Habit stacking uses those existing habits as the undeniable cue for a new habit. The formula is, after my current habit, I will do my new habit.
So practically, this looks like after I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. Or after I take off my work shoes at the end of the day, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. You are chaining behaviors together so that the completion of one automatically triggers the craving for the next.
It's like building a domino effect.
Exactly. But beyond our internal plans, the first law emphasizes something crucial: environment design. Visual cues are the greatest catalyst for human behavior. We are highly visual creatures. If you want to drink more water, don't hide your water bottle in the back of a cabinet. Put it in the center of your desk.
Out of sight, out of mind is a real thing.
100%. If you want to play guitar more, don't keep it in its case in the back of your closet. Put it on a stand right in the middle of your living room. You have to design an environment where the cues of your good habits are aggressively obvious and visible.
Which naturally leads us to the second law, addressing the craving. Make it attractive. Just because a cue is obvious doesn't mean you'll care about it.
Right.
You can put your running shoes in the middle of the floor, but at 5 a.m., you might just step over them.
Yeah.
We need to make our habits appealing because, neurologically, it is the anticipation of a reward, the dopamine spike before the action, that gets us to move. One clever way to manufacture this craving is through temptation bundling.
Temptation
This
bundling.
works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do.
This is essentially bribing yourself, but in a highly strategic way.
Hmm.
For example, you make a rule that you are only allowed to listen to your absolute favorite true crime podcast, the thing you eagerly want to do while you are running on the treadmill, the thing you need to do.
Right, you lock them together.
The treadmill becomes attractive because it is the only gateway to the podcast. But Clear also emphasizes the massive, often subconscious role of culture in making habits attractive.
We are fundamentally social animals. Evolutionarily, fitting in with the tribe was a matter of life and death. Therefore, our brains are wired to soak up the habits of our family, our friends, and our community. We constantly mirror the behavior of those around us to secure social approval.
We want to fit in.
Always. If you want to make a difficult habit wildly attractive, you need to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. If you want to read more, join a book club. If you want to get fit, join a CrossFit gym or a running club. When your desired identity aligns with the tribe's identity, the social approval acts as a massive dopamine multiplier.
All right, so we've made the cue obvious and we've made the craving attractive. Now we have to actually do the thing. The third law tackles the response. Make it easy. Now, I have to stop here and challenge this. We live in a culture that absolutely glorifies the hustle.
Grind culture.
Yes. We are told constantly on social media that achieving great things requires massive willpower, grinding it out, suffering, and finding endless wells of motivation. But this methodology argues that motivation is actually overrated.
It does, and the behavioral science completely backs him up. Relying on motivation is a losing game because motivation fluctuates wildly based on your blood sugar, your sleep, your stress levels.
So true.
Human nature naturally defaults to the law of least effort. Given two options, we will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism to conserve energy. Look at our worst habits: scrolling endlessly on our phones, eating junk food, watching TV.
They're just so easy.
Exactly. These habits steal hours of our time, not because they are profoundly fulfilling, but because they are remarkably convenient. They require near zero friction to execute. So instead of trying to artificially inflate your motivation to overcome high friction, the secret is to radically reduce the friction associated with your good habits.
You want the path of least resistance to align with your best intentions. You have to decrease the number of steps between you and your good habits. If you want to go for a run in the morning, don't leave your clothes in the dresser.
Where do you put them?
Lay out your workout clothes, your shoes, and your headphones right next to your bed the night before. You are priming your environment to make the future action as frictionless as possible.
Precisely. And to truly master the third law, Clear introduces a concept that I think is the most actionable piece of advice in the entire book: the 2-minute rule.
Oh, this is a game changer.
When you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You take your massive ambition and downscale it until it's into a 2-minute window. Read before bed becomes coming for.
Read one page.
Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat.
Fold the laundry becomes fold one pair of socks. I know a lot of people will hear that and think it sounds ridiculous. Like, what is the actual point of reading just one single page? You aren't going to learn anything. But the goal here isn't to accomplish the whole task. The goal is to master the art of showing up. A habit must be established before it can be improved.
You can't improve a habit that doesn't exist.
Exactly. You have to literally become the type of person who opens the book every night before you can worry about reading a chapter a night. You are casting a tiny vote for your new identity. Standardize the behavior first, then optimize it later.
Finally, we reach the culmination of the loop, the fourth law: dealing with the reward. Make it satisfying. We are infinitely more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience ends with a feeling of satisfaction.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
A massive evolutionary catch. Our brains evolved in an immediate return environment. When an ancient human found berries, they ate them immediately. Action. Immediate reward. Today, we live in a delayed return environment. You go to work today, but you get a paycheck in 2 weeks. You go to the gym today, but you get fit in 6 months. The cardinal rule of behavior change states, what is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
And this evolutionary mismatch is the root cause of why bad habits are so easy and good habits are so hard. The immediate reward of smoking a cigarette is stress relief and a nicotine buzz. The delayed punishment is lung cancer 20 years
Your
later.
brain prioritizes the immediate buzz.
Exactly. When you are trying to build a good habit, like going to the gym, the delayed reward is a healthy, muscular body, but the immediate experience is often just sweat, fatigue, and sore muscles. Your brain registers the immediate punishment and says, let's not do that again. So, to build a good habit, you have to artificially attach an immediate, satisfying reward to the end of the behavior.
And one of the most effective, low-friction ways to make a habit satisfying is to use a habit tracker.
I love a good habit tracker.
The psychological power of crossing a day off on a physical calendar or checking a box in a journal is immense. It provides a visual, immediate measurement of your progress. Your brain gets a tiny hit of dopamine every time you make that check mark. It feels incredibly satisfying to look at a chain of X's on your calendar. The motivation shifts from the delayed goal to the immediate satisfaction of maintaining the streak. The mantra becomes, don't break the chain.
But of course, real life happens. We get sick, our kids get sick, we have to travel, we just flat out forget. What happens when the chain breaks? Do we just abandon the system? Here is where the material highlights a critical nuance for long-term success. Never miss twice.
It is a vital rule for self-compassion and system maintenance. Missing your habit once is an accident. It happens to everyone. It's statistically inevitable. But missing it twice is the start of a new bad habit. The first mistake is rarely the one that ruins you. It is the spiral of repeated mistakes, the rationalizations that follow. Building habits isn't about attaining perfection. It's about quick course correction. If you eat a terrible meal for lunch, you don't throw your hands up and say, well, the day's ruined, I'm a failure, I'll eat a whole pizza for dinner.
I've definitely done that.
We all have. But you recognize the slip and you ensure your very next meal is healthy. You never miss twice.
Okay, so those are the 4 laws for building good habits. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. It's an incredibly robust system. But what happens when we need to flip the script? How do we uproot the powerful, deeply entrenched oak tree of a bad habit? If the 4 steps build habits, we have to invert the 4 laws to destroy them.
Exactly. If you want to break a bad habit, you apply the inversion of the first law. Make it invisible. You have to radically reduce your exposure to the cue. And to illustrate how powerful cues are, the book references a truly fascinating historical study, the Vietnam War heroin addiction problem. It fundamentally altered how we understand addiction and environment.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this historical context completely blew my mind. I want to spend a minute here. During the Vietnam War, heroin use among U.S. soldiers was a massive crisis. The military commissioned a researcher named Lee Robbins to study the problem. Her findings were staggering. Roughly 20% of soldiers in Vietnam had become addicted to heroin.
20%? That's wild.
The Nixon administration was terrified. They believed that when the war ended, tens of thousands of deeply addicted soldiers were going to flood back into American cities, causing an unprecedented crime and public health crisis.
And their fear was entirely justified based on the prevailing addiction science of the 1970s. At the time, addiction was viewed either as a permanent moral failing or an irreversible brain disease. The consensus was once an addict, always an addict. But when the soldiers did return home, Lee Robbins tracked them, and the results shocked the psychiatric establishment.
What happened?
An astounding 9 out of 10 of these soldiers eliminated their addiction virtually overnight. Only 5% became re-addicted within a year.
Wait, I have to challenge this because that totally contradicts everything we're taught about addiction in modern society. If breaking a severe heroin addiction is as easy as just coming home, why do rehab centers even exist? Why is the modern opioid crisis so intractable?
It's all about contextual dependency and cues. In Vietnam, the soldiers were completely surrounded by powerful cues triggering heroin use. The extreme daily stress of being in a war zone, the easy availability of highly potent heroin, and the peer group of fellow soldiers who were also using
So perfect.
it. Was the perfect storm of obvious cues and attractive cravings. But when they flew back to the United States, they found themselves in an environment that was essentially devoid of those specific triggers. They were back in their hometowns, with their families, safe from combat. Without the cues, the cravings plummeted. It proved that addictions could spontaneously dissolve if there was a radical, permanent change in the environment.
And to answer my own question about rehab centers, a rehab center acts like the flight home from Vietnam. It changes your context.
Exactly.
The problem is, after 30 days in a pristine, queue-free rehab center, most people go right back to their old apartments with their old friends and their old stressors.
Hmm.
The queues rush back, the cravings return, and relapse occurs. The Vietnam study proves that self-control isn't about having incredible superhuman willpower. It's about designing your environment so you don't need willpower. You remove the cue.
Right. If you spend too much time wasting away on your phone, leave it in another room while you work. Make the cue invisible. Don't rely on willpower to ignore it. Remove the temptation entirely.
So powerful.
To continue breaking the bad habit, you apply the inversion of the second law. Make it unattractive. You have to fundamentally reframe your mindset. You have to consciously highlight the benefits of avoiding the bad habit to counter the brain's anticipation of reward.
How does that work in practice?
Remember, every behavior has a surface-level craving and a deeper underlying evolutionary motive. You might crave a cigarette, but your underlying motive is to reduce stress and anxiety. Once you realize the motive, you can actively find more attractive, healthier ways to fulfill it, like taking a walk or doing deep breathing, rendering the bad habit less appealing by comparison.
Then we hit the inversion of the third law. Make it difficult. You have to increase the friction. Add as many steps and barriers as humanly possible between you and the bad habit. If you want to watch less television, unplug the TV and take the batteries out of the remote after every single use.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Put the remote in a drawer in another room. The friction makes it significantly harder to mindlessly turn it on. This is also where the brilliant concept of a commitment device or Ulysses Pact comes into play. Oh, I love the Ulysses Pact. It is named after the Greek myth of Ulysses, who knew his ship was going to sail past the sirens creatures whose beautiful songs lured sailors to steer their ships into the rocks and die. Ulysses wanted to hear the song, but he knew he wouldn't have the willpower to resist.
So what did he do?
He ordered his crew to tie him tightly to the mast of the ship and plug their own ears with beeswax. He made a choice in the present that locked in his future behavior. A commitment device is exactly that. It restricts your future choices to only the good ones.
So practically, a commitment device is buying food in individual single-serving portions rather than in bulk, so you physically can't overeat without opening multiple packages. It's leaving your credit cards at home and only bringing a $50 bill to the bar, so you literally cannot spend more than you intended, no matter how much your inhibitions drop.
You are automating your future success.
By making the bad habit incredibly difficult or impossible to execute when your willpower is low.
And finally, to complete the destruction of a bad habit, the inversion of the fourth law. Make it unsatisfying. We are deeply sensitive to the opinions of others. Social pain is processed in the brain very similarly to physical pain. Knowing that someone is watching you is a powerful motivator, so you get an accountability partner. Or take it a step further and create a formal habit contract.
A habit contract is about making the cost of your bad habits public and immediately painful, thereby fulfilling the cardinal rule of making bad behavior immediately punished. If you sign a contract with your accountability partner stating that you will pay them $50 every single time you miss a scheduled workout, the immediate consequence of skipping the gym becomes highly unsatisfying. The financial pain outweighs the comfort of the couch.
Okay, so up to this point, we've built a robust mechanical system for our habits. We know how to build them, we know how to break them, but the sources take us into some advanced tactics toward the end, and it brings up a topic that genuinely makes a lot of people uncomfortable in the personal development space. We have to talk about genetics.
This is a tough one.
Do genes matter? What about natural talent? Does our biology dictate our destiny, regardless of how good our habits are?
It's an uncomfortable question because we want to believe that hard work can overcome absolutely anything. But Clear addresses it with refreshing honesty. Genes do not determine your ultimate destiny, but they absolutely determine your areas of opportunity. The secret to maximizing your odds of success isn't just grinding harder, it's choosing the right field of competition.
Pick the right habit, the one that aligns with your biology, and progress is fast and easy. Pick the wrong habit, and life is an endless, frustrating struggle.
He uses this incredible contrast, though it's somewhat implied in the broader text, between Michael Phelps, arguably the greatest Olympic swimmer in history, and Hechem El Guerrouj, one of the greatest Olympic long-distance runners.
Yeah, look at their body types.
Michael Phelps is 6 feet 4 inches tall. He has a disproportionately long torso, relatively short legs, and massive paddle-like hands and feet. He is literally biomechanically engineered for moving efficiently through water.
And El Guerrouj.
Hechem El Guerrouj is 5 feet 9 inches tall, with incredibly long legs and a short, light torso. He is biomechanically engineered for running and displacing minimal weight over long distances.
The thought experiment here is crucial. If Michael Phelps decided to dedicate his life, with all his incredible atomic habits and work ethic, to competing as an elite long-distance runner against El Garouge, he would fail miserably. His genetics, which are a massive unfair advantage in the pool, would become a severe liability on the track. His long Corsa would be dead weight.
Genes cannot be easily changed, which means they provide a powerful advantage in favorable circumstances and a serious disadvantage in unfavorable ones.
The takeaway for you is not fatalism, it's strategic alignment. Habits are significantly easier to build and maintain when they align with your natural abilities and your innate personality traits. You have to play a game that favors your strengths, and if you look around and can't find a game that favors your specific mix of skills, you have to create one.
You have to combine your skills in a unique way to carve out your own niche, where your specific genetic and personality traits transition from being neutral to being an active advantage.
And as we bring all of this together, the origin story, the math of 1%, the systems over goals, the 4 laws, and aligning with our nature, we have to look at the ultimate trajectory of these atomic habits. To beautifully illustrate how this all culminates, clear references an ancient Greek parable known as the Sorite's paradox.
The paradox of the heap.
Exactly. It is a brilliant philosophical tool to understand compounding. It asks a simple question. Can one coin make a person rich? If you give a person one coin, are they rich?
Yeah, of course not.
But what if you add another coin? Still no. And another, and another. If you relentlessly keep adding single coins one by one at some undefined point, you cross a threshold. You look at the pile and say, that person is wealthy. You must admit that the state of wealth was achieved entirely through the accumulation of single, tiny, seemingly insignificant additions.
This is the atomic synthesis of the entire book. Can one tiny change transform your life? Can reading one page or doing one push-up or saving $1 fundamentally alter who you are as a person? In isolation, looking at just that one action, it's highly unlikely you would say yes. But what if you make another change and another, and you don't break the chain?
The holy grail of habit change isn't a single 1% improvement. It is 1,000 of them. They are the individual coins. They are the building blocks, the atoms of a larger, unstoppable system.
It's slow at first.
In the beginning, these small improvements seem meaningless because they get washed away by the sheer weight of your current system and your old identity. Just like one coin doesn't make you rich. But gradually, as you rigorously continue to layer small changes on top of one another, the scales of life start to move.
Each improvement is like adding a grain of sand to the positive side of the scale, slowly, agonizingly tilting things in your favor. Eventually, if you stick with it through the plateau of latent potential, you hit a tipping point. Suddenly, it feels easier to stick with good habits than to fall back into bad ones. The momentum shifts.
The weight of the system is finally working for you rather than against you. The true power of atomic habits is that they compound. A 1% error, a rationalized excuse to skip a day, duplicated day after day, compounds into toxic, life-altering results. A tiny win, repeated daily, compounds into remarkable success.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought to mull over as we conclude this analysis. We established earlier that your outcomes, your physical health, your financial wealth, your relationships, your accumulated knowledge, are simply a lagging measure of your daily habits. So look at your life today.
Really look at it.
Look closely at the tiny, seemingly insignificant choices you made just this morning. If those choices were compounding interest, what future reality are your current atomic habits quietly building for you right now behind the scenes?
It's a question that demands deep, sometimes uncomfortable self-reflection. Are you actively building a mechanical system that leads inevitably to the identity you desire, or are you passively hoping a massive goal will magically override your daily behaviors?
That is exactly why this material matters so much. Atomic Habits democratizes success. It takes achievement off the pedestal of genetic destiny or superhuman willpower and hands you a compassionate, highly mechanical, deeply practical system for self-design. It removes the heavy burden of guilt. If you're failing to change, it's not because you lack character or moral fortitude. You just have the wrong system.
It's an indispensable framework for anyone who feels stuck on that plateau of latent potential, putting in the hard work but exhausted by the lack of visible results. It provides the exact neurological and practical blueprint for shifting your fundamental identity one tiny atomic vote at a time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, remember that expectation of the cinematic moment we started with. Real transformation is never going to look like a sudden, miraculous lightning bolt. Instead, it looks like millions of tiny atomic structures, slowly and quietly building the architecture of who you are going to become. The scale of your life is tipping right now based on the very next habit you choose to execute. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We invite you to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another deep dive into the ideas that shape our world.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.